Is there any kind of a middle ground for somebody who saying they want to own their home, they don't necessarily want to deal with the all of the shoveling snow and all of the cutting of grass, and they don't want to, end up paying their mortgage, paying their utilities, and paying a condo fee on top of it, like having a whole other apartment that they're paying for. Is there a middle ground?
I mean, there are freehold townhouses or condominiums that are freehold, but they're smaller. Like it might be a smaller plot of land, gardens, and then if it's freehold, then you're responsible for it, but it's not as big.
Again, especially for renters making that transition, I think as much as possible, people should look into being an owner and not a permanent renter, at least not at every stage in their life necessarily. Welcome to CooLife Podcast, brought to you by therealthingdating.com. www.therealthingdating.com.
Polydor Records for out scouting. This girl grabbed my bangs and ran my head right into the speaker.
Oh,
and everyone heard like this. Yeah.
When we shot the scene in Good Will Hunting, I didn't know who most of these people were at the time. I mean, they weren't stars. It was Gus Van Sant that directed it. Gus Van Sant was on the floor with Matt Damon's character. I didn't even know who Matt Damon was at that time.
I'm Eva John. I'm a former candidate for local government. I was a children's television entertainer, and I love this world, and I believe we should take care of each other and have a lot of fun along the way. Welcome to CooLife. Here we go. Welcome to CooLife Podcast. I'm Eva John, and we're continuing part 2 of our conversation with VITTORIA Gallone, real estate agent. VITTORIA, welcome.
Hi, Eva.
The idea of curb appeal, you mentioned that.
Yeah.
Is that a real thing? I mean, if somebody's really keen to buy a house, does it matter that much what the outside looks like as they walk up to it? So much as does it have the features they want? So take a look at this perfectly nice plain house now, and there's nothing wrong with that house, especially if it's got the things you want. It's got the, who knows, a pool in the back and a man cave and granite counters and fantastic appliances that come with the house. But walking up to a house like this, what would you do to improve the way this house presents as far as curb appeal?
Okay. Make sure that you've cleaned off your lawn. Your lawn is cut, right? It's not overgrown. There's nothing on it. The one thing that I always think is the door. The door is a good place to give personality and make it welcoming. So for example, at the door, let's say painting it a different color, a welcoming color, if you do it red or blue or black, something like that, and then put some potted plants on the sides, add some like pretty flowers. It depends what the season is, obviously, but whether it's any season really, there's pretty flowers in the spring, fall mums or pumpkins, but that to me is one thing that you can play with easily, is painting the door. It doesn't take a lot of money, and you can really brighten it up, and then brighten it up with some flower pots or a wreath, maybe adding a wreath to the front door, things like that. If you've got a big garage, I mean, it depends. In this case, what I'm looking at, the picture, the garage kind of matches the frames, so that's okay. So if you were to paint the door, that will make it stand out.
So is it worthwhile to put that burst of color onto the garage door?
In my opinion, I don't like when people mess with the garage door. I mean, they're huge, they're ugly. You want it to blend into the building as much as possible. In this case, it's white. If you were going to, I would strongly suggest painting the front door in this scenario, because that will separate it, and that's where you want people to focus, is the front door, right? So I do pick a nice color, and that matches the home, and that's great. Then you don't have to worry about the door, the garage door, even if it's big, if it's a big door. If you already have a nice door in color and you have a garage that matches the door, I would suggest go more muted on the garage. You want to really make that disappear into the background, the garage.
Now, it can be a bit of an endeavor. Is it worthwhile to do something, for example, like if you have a single door, to just have construction people come in and change that, switch it out to a double door to give that grand feeling?
You don't necessarily have to do that. No, I wouldn't, and obviously it depends on your budget. It also depends, how much space there is. I mean, but I don't think I'd be fooling around with that. I mean, paint is very reasonable and cheaper, and making small adjustments, I love paint. You can paint anything and make it look refreshed and bring it to life. And so I would go that way before I do any construction.
Very practical.
Very.
Now here we have a look at house number 2, and to see, again, perfectly fine house. Maybe not everything perfect, but almost perfectly fine. And what would you suggest as far as making it more appealing to a potential buyer?
Mm-hmm. It's not a bad looking house. I mean, there's shrubs that, here and there. Again, landscaping can go a long way. So whether you add, depending on the season, add flowers, and they're pretty reasonable too. Like those kind of changes, again, a nice welcoming color on your door or a wreath, some potted plants on the side, some urns, and then of course some landscaping. But otherwise, I mean, I see small windows on this house, and I wouldn't be changing or doing in construction on making those windows bigger, So that's, I would probably keep it to that.
Is it worth making any type of adjustment, like shutters, to kind of make more of an illusion of a bigger window when you do have a small window?
It depends. Depends if, if you were to paint them white, everything looks brighter, and, paint them out, again, you can. But again, I think that's a possibility. But again, I would focus maybe on bringing out, in this case, this house could use more landscaping.
For sure.
Make sure your grass is cut and tidy.
That your lawn exists.
Yes. Yeah.
Level. In a different scenario, if someone has a condo owner doesn't have any control over curb appeal, let's say, go out and start landscaping in front of their condo building. What can you do to stand out when, again, 3 other condos, exactly the same footprint as yours in the building, you can't stand out due to curb appeal? What can you do?
Well, then you may want to consider staging. You might want to consider staging. It depends totally on what the property looks like. I mean, I have gone into buildings, and there's 2 different. I recently went to go show someone a condo that was outstanding. The building actually is a very good building too, has lots of amenities and well taken care of. But when it came to the apartment, the specific unit, the one was very well designed and kept. And now the second one, different floor, but same footprint, some of the same updates. Both had a galley kitchen, both had an extended kind of like a pantry, like a butler pantry at the end or coffee station. But one was just done, and again, it was the paint, and it was the decluttering, and it was, making it look very clean and open. The one that was staged, because the one didn't need staging. I mean, the owner had an eye for it and did a beautiful job. The paint was neutral and it was very nice. The other one was actually staged, but staging can also look a little like you try too hard. So you have to be careful as well and try and keep it minimalistic, but not too minimalistic, because sometimes you go into these places and it's really empty, and then they have a chair and a table, like a chair and a coffee or a round table, or so there's a balance. You have to have a good balance there. Mm-hmm.
Good to know. Thank you for those tips. Right now, we're taking a break to talk about our sponsors and supporters. Please send in your comments to info@CooLifeWorld.com. That's info@COOLIFE world.com. We're taking a break to talk about our sponsors and supporters. We'll be back with more real estate talk on CooLife Podcast.
Those lonely days of lockdowns and isolation are gone for good. Go to www.therealthingdating.com. That's www.therealthingdating.com. It's time to share. Share your time, share your life, share your love. www.therealthingdating.com. Join for free. Upgrade at any time, starting at just $5.99 a month. www.therealthingdating.com. Because it's time. You're listening to the CooLife Podcast. We'll be back in 3, 2, 1.
We're back on CooLife Podcast. I'm Eva John, and I'm continuing my conversation with Vittoria Gallone, real estate agent. Vittoria, I want to ask you about people who are making that transition from being a renter to a homeowner. Now, for a homeowner, becoming, saying, okay, I'm no longer relying on, the landlord for certain things, but all of a sudden it's shoveling snow and you don't have any control on how often you have to shovel snow, or mowing your lawn, and that's going to happen usually once a week, once every couple of weeks. Otherwise, the city can lean on you and start giving you a hard time and finding you. And these are, that looks like fun, but it ends up being a big responsibility. So if someone is not ready to take on a lot of these physical labors that come along with the responsibility of owning a home, and they just want to get a condo, what kinds of condo fees are being charged today in this very, very fast upward moving economy?
Well, the condo fees or maintenance fees depends on the amenities of the building that are offered, as well as the services. So it could vary. It varies a lot. If you've got a condominium building that has a pool and a gym and gardens and guest suites and party rooms, things like that, then your maintenance fees may be, and depending on what they do, obviously, They have to take care of the whole property. Some maintenance fees include water, include electricity, include internet. They can include everything. So that also could have a higher maintenance fee or common expenses. Whereas if you have a small building and really they might be doing landscaping and snow removal, as simple as that, no real amenities otherwise, then they could be lower. But always common expenses or maintenance fees include monies that go towards a reserve fund, which is for bigger ticketed items like your roof and your windows or any major repairs that a building or corporation needs to do, versus maintaining operations, day-to-day operations or landscaping and things like that. So it really does vary, and they could be anywhere from hundreds to thousand and something, right? Like it really does depend on the condominium corporation.
Now, if you've moved into a condo or you're taking a look at a place or they've just resurfaced the tennis court, are you looking forward to then the condo fees are going to creep up now because they have to balance out using that reserve? Or will it just stay even, they would just wait for it to build up again?
Well, the reserve usually is for bigger ticketed items like windows, roof, could be parking lot, things of that nature. And when there's a reserve fund, then there's other processes in place for that. The common expenses could increase year to year in a condominium and then again, it depends on, let's say your water and electricity are included in your common expenses. Well, those go up yearly. So common expenses could go up yearly. That depends as well, again, on your financial statements, how the board manages that, and the condominium corporation management company. So that all comes into play, whether fees go up, and maybe if there's a surplus, if you're lucky enough, maybe they may come down a little. So it varies.
Now, what happens with a condo owner who has missed those maintenance fees?
So it's like a mortgage payment, right? You don't want to be missing those common expense or monthly fees. You want to be able to pay them on time when you're supposed to. What can happen is the board will notify you. They may have their lawyer write you a letter and telling you if you're in arrears. And then, of course, they may have, depending on the board or on the management office, what action they take after that.
So a lot's on the line. I mean, if you're saying that it's like having a mortgage payment. So are they, in the end, they're over these maintenance fees, they're risking losing their condo altogether, even if they're paying their mortgage on time?
Yeah, you can be. If you were, depending on how much you are in arrears, it could be, yes. Most likely, you'd probably hear from the lawyers, and then depending on their process, it varies.
Pay your condo fees. Mm-hmm. Pay your mortgage, pay your condo fees. And it's not easy. It's been a tough pandemic for some people. And
yes.
It's one of those things, I think, why some renters might say, okay, they just want to maintain the status quo. But on the other side, you're never getting your investment of your rent back. There's nothing coming back. You pack and you leave, and that's that. After years and years of paying someone else's bills by paying your rent. It's always worthwhile to be an owner if you can, but there's definitely a big responsibility when it comes to condos, because once you've done your mortgage payment, once you've taken care of your groceries and had your vacation and everything, it can all go to the wind if you haven't kept up with your condo fees, right?
Yeah, and that's like owning a home, right? There's taxes. I mean, in a condo as well, there's taxes, and there's utility bills. When you don't pay your utility bills and you're in arrears, that can affect your home ownership as well. So those are all part and parcel of ownership versus rental,
Because
right?
they can put a lien on your property from your utility, and that
Yes, and they can do that with not paying your condo fees. They can put lien on your condo, on your unit.
So it's something to consider, take seriously, but there are a lot of huge benefits to being the owner of your property, but it also comes with responsibilities.
Yeah, and it depends your situation. Right? Whether you rent or own, you may not want to be responsible for all those daily operations, right?
We're taking a break to talk about our sponsors and supporters. We'll be back. CooLife Podcast.
Those lonely days of lockdowns and isolation are gone for good. Go to www.therealthingdating.com. That's www.therealthingdating.com. It's time to share. Share your time, share your life, share your love. www.therealthingdating.com. Join for free. Upgrade at any time, starting at just $5.99 a month. www.therealthingdating.com. Because it's time. This is CooLife Podcast. Please remember to subscribe to CooLife on your streaming service and on YouTube as Hellenique Today. That's HELENIQUE Today. Because that helps us to bring more cool stuff to your ears. You're listening to the CooLife Podcast. We'll be right back.
And we are back on CooLife Podcast. I'm Eva John, and we are continuing with Vittoria Gallone, real estate agent. Vittoria, is there any kind of a middle ground for somebody who saying they want to own their home, they don't necessarily want to deal with all of the shoveling snow and all of the cutting of grass, and they don't want to end up paying their mortgage, paying their utilities, and paying a condo fee on top of it, like having a whole other apartment that they're paying for? Is there a middle ground?
Between either owning a home or owning a condo? The middle ground?
Well, I mean, where the fees lay, because that's the thing. It's like, what's coming out of your pocket? Is there a middle ground where you can own a property that doesn't have the demands of the maintenance of a single family home, but doesn't have the high condo fees? So is there something in the middle?
If you were to get, there are freehold townhouses or condominiums that are freehold, but they're smaller. Like it might be a smaller plot of land, gardens, and then if it's freehold, then you're responsible for it, but it's not as big. I think if you want something, look for a smaller home, look for a smaller size lot. If you have the means, you may want to source out the landscaping, for example, if you have that means, but something in between.
Sounds like
I
that
can't
might
think of anything.
be it, because then with a freehold townhome, then like you said, it's a smaller plot. They've got just a little square patch of a backyard, which half of it's patio, and they could even make the rest a rock garden if they're permitted. And then they don't have necessarily the same kinds of responsibilities financially,
Expenses.
right?
Yeah. So if you, get a smaller, but have freeholds where there's no common expenses.
Right. So
Mhm.
that's something to consider too, if you're
Mhm.
looking for a way to make that transition without necessarily getting an $800 a month fee because you live in a place with a pool and a sauna and a games room and a TV room and the practice your music studio room and a pool table.
Yeah, but what you want to be able to do with your salesperson is look at those expenses, right? And break it down. So look for those things and then break it down. And if you're doing a budget or maybe have a budget, do some compare analysis again. And your sales agent should be able to help you with that. It's really important to know what you're exactly getting into. And if it's valuable to you.
Now, home ownership, it's a pretty big thing.
Yes.
Biggest purchase most people make in their entire lifetime.
Yes.
Everyone's getting that good old $500 million yacht. It's on my little those dream boards. Anyway, so it's like, aside from that, but planning it out and knowing what you can or cannot afford, just like step by step. If someone just wants to get a little, 1-bedroom or studio condo, say $375,000. If you say prepare for that purchase, what are you aiming for is a good amount of your deposit, down payment, and then once you've made that down payment for your monthly mortgage fees, to say, okay, this is manageable compared to paying $1,200 a month in rent. If someone wants to aim for that, what are the comparisons and what they might end up with once they've gotten, like, what are they saving for their down payment and what should they look forward to for their mortgage payments?
So if you're, depending on the price of the home, but these steps may help at any price point. You really, in working with your sales agent, this is where they will help, hopefully, is that firstly, that pre-approval. You need to have a pre-approval and not just, oh, I went to the bank and they said I can have $300,000. You need to have it in writing so that when it comes time that you put that condition upon finance, that it's a quicker process. So you have to have a commitment letter from your bank saying that, yes, I will get $300,000, or that's what I've been approved for. So then that's great. So now we're going to look at properties within your budget. And with that, again, I mentioned deposit. You find a home and you make an offer. Hopefully your sales agent, even as a buyer, will have done a CMA, so compare marketing analysis, and will look in the area you're looking, the type of home you're looking or property you're looking at, and compare that for you to make sure that it is within market value. And then you can make an informed decision as to what your offer is going to be.
Now, they make that decision what their offer is going to be, and they say, okay, but for the offer to be like reasonable, what percentage of the value of a home is considered a good standard down payment? Because a deposit can be really flexible, as we were discussing before, but in the end, then they're going to be making a down payment.
Yes.
Or they're not getting a house. Right. And those days way back, I think there was like in the 80s and 90s, everyone was like, 5 to 10% down payment for first time buyers. And then for some people, they ended up in a whole lot of trouble. You make a 5% down payment on a $500,000 home. That's a lot of money you owe.
Right.
So what percentage, again, let's go to the $375,000 condo that someone's going to find, must exist somewhere. And
Yeah.
what percentage should they be aiming for as a down payment?
Okay, so that again is varying, and I was going to get to that because if you're a first time buyer, then it could be the 5%. Now there's restrictions with that, obviously, because there's CMHC,
Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation.
right?
Used to ride my bike by there
Oh,
every
yeah.
single day growing up in the Ottawa Valley.
Yeah, okay. So for first-time buyers, it's different from someone else who's buying for the second time or third time or so forth. First-time buyers, there might be some incentives. There are some right now with the government. There's mortgage. The stress tests are different for refinancing and so forth if you're buying again. But so those are, it could vary 5, 10%, 20%. The more you can have as a down payment, the better it is.
And it's better because that means you're going to have a smaller mortgage payment.
And you may not need the CMHC housing, Canadian Mortgage Housing Corporation to ensure that, right? If it's more than 5% that you're putting down. But so it varies. It really does. And that's where you have to first speak with your bank, right? And they can also give you these handy dandy calculators that you just put in with your salesperson or even with your banker. You can put in, okay, let's take a scenario. If you're going to put in 5%, what is the monthly mortgage payment look like? It also takes into account taxes and utilities. Some of them do that as well, so you be prepared to have those numbers with you as well. So those are some of the things. So it really does depend, and that's why it's very important to be working with a salesperson and really asking your bank manager to really help you out in determining that. Because the more information you have around that, but of course, always, a bigger down payment is going to be in your best interest.
It's always nice to know. And again, especially for renters making that transition, I think as much as possible, people should look into being an owner and not a permanent renter, at least not at every stage in their life necessarily. And when you realize that if you get the right property with the right preparations, what you're paying currently for rent could very well be what your mortgage payments would be as a homeowner. And it's especially if you're living in a major city where just to have a decent home, a lot of times looking at a jumping off point from like $1,400 a month, right?
Yes.
That's a fair bit of money towards a mortgage,
right?
Towards home ownership. So something to think about. And thank you for kind of breaking down a bit of what people need to look forward to and prepare for if they are making that transition. And with that, we're at the end of my conversation with Vittoria Gallone, real estate agent. Vittoria, I want to thank you. Always a pleasure to have you here at CooLife Podcast. And I want to say happy holidays to you, your whole family, and to all of our viewers and listeners. I'm Eva John for CooLife Podcast. See you in the new year.